is something that happened earlier today. Get this one out of the way right away, which is basically what happened. Ernest Roots posting this earlier. Just let me know if you guys can see it on your side. You guys can see what's going on there. You guys can see it? All right. You won't be able to hear anything yet. So I'm going to adjust that just now. So for the viewers, I think you will be able to hear the sound. But as you can see there, Ernest putting out a tweet saying, sorry about that, putting out a tweet saying, this happened outside High Court in Johannesburg today. EFF supporters first tried to prevent us from leaving the premises. Then they started chanting, "Kill the Boer." Then they tried to steal my phone. And this is the video that Ernst posted earlier today. Let's have a look. It's only 49 seconds.
Sorry guys.
So there you saw some of the commotion out there. I mean, it's all right. I'll stay it first. It's just absolutely insane what the EFF try and do from time to time. And we saw Ernst and Daniel Elof, I believe, exiting the court after their little court date with the EFF. Let's start with Koketso, man. What do you have to say about what you just saw?
I think it does well to highlight the character of the EFF, their supporters, their leadership, who haven't condoned this as of yet. But yeah, there is something to be said about the Red Berets, their conduct in general, and the kind of respect they have for other people, particularly those who don't agree with their ideology, their principles, and the things they want to happen at a parliamentary level, etc. So there is a conversation to be had there that this is exactly the type of behavior you find from the EFF, and this is definitely not the type of behavior you want out of people who would be presidential material or effectively a ruling government.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Xavier, I cannot wait to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, I think it's not just today that he suffered this. I think he suffered it as well yesterday when they were in court. The EFF has been very, and the funny thing is they haven't actually sent any figureheads to court to make an appearance outside or show face before the cameras. They've kind of sent their ground forces, as they call it. And what this video proves, again, with every time we see the EFF on TV or we see them on the media, it proves that the EFF have successfully commodified violence and disruption in our country. They've actually made a business out of being disruptive, out of being violent, out of being threatening, and they're successful at it. And the reason they're successful is it's mainly because, as we'll get into it later, but as the July unrest report notes, there has been a hollowing of our state infrastructure, including the security infrastructure. Anywhere else in the world, the EFF would be considered a terrorist organization. There's no doubt about it. But in South Africa, they are protected by the Constitution in various ways. And this is what this fight about Kill the Boer is actually about. It's about their right to say, kill the Boer is a matter of opinion. It's not a threat. It's not an act of racism. It's none of that. They're going to lose this case. I'm pretty sure if they don't, it's going to go to Constitutional Court. I have no doubts Afriforum will probably take it there if needs be. We're only at the High Court level with this right now. But it doesn't stop at kill the Boer. it actually continues. You've seen the EFF say Indians. You've seen them say different races. You've seen them selectively choose foreigners, etc., on racial basis that they then start to incite violence. And this was shown again in the July riots from the EFF. It's been shown again when they attacked cliques. Shampoo was racist. Can you believe? Shampoo was racist. So there's a lot we can say about the EFF, but I think the realization I've come to is they've made a business out of violence and disruption, and they're very good at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I give my comments on some of the things you said, I want to get to Dodgy and Sunflower, but I'll start with Sunflower. Sunflower, very quickly, I think this is maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is one of your first public appearances on a YouTube, on a public platform. I could be wrong. But thank you so much for joining and being a guest on the show and giving a female voice to a much needed political sphere, if I can put it that way. So thank you very much for doing so. And I encourage everyone to go follow Sunflower on Twitter. Everyone's links on Twitter is provided in the description below. Please go check out. She is lit. She's absolutely lit on Twitter. I love it. And Sunflower, take it away. Your thoughts on the EFF and what they did today. Sunflower?
Okay, you can hear me, right? Well, thank you guys for having me on the panel. You're right in saying that this is my first public platform politically, if that's what we're discussing. But I have been, I have appeared publicly on the platforms before. Yeah, I have done some local productions. Wrote.
Oh, looks like we lost connection there. Sorry, guys. She'll be back in just a moment. In the meantime, let's go to Dodgy. What do you think about what the EFF did today?
Well, I think like Kuketso and Joe also, not Joe, Xavier mentioned. Sorry, Xavier. It's a hallmark of the EFF actually, and they have monetized this or started to profit from this sort of.
Sorry, guys. Just when I'm about
problem.
to give my piece on the EFF, it seems like the gremlins kicked me out. And or perhaps the gremlin is the EFF, and they know I have nothing nice to say about them. So,
well, yeah, that as
what
well.
I would really like to know is that what does the EFF actually stand for? God forbid they actually become, or the leader becomes president of this country. If things do not go their way, is this how we're going to run the country? By beating up mannequins, by calling shampoo racist, by attacking retail stores because somebody abroad had something on a t-shirt that affected people in South Africa? When are we going to actually engage in intellectual dialogue and not in this divisive behavior where it's just violence all the time? I honestly have nothing nice to say about the EFF, but I think everybody who follows me knows this. The leader does not, he doesn't depict maturity at all. Okay, there's a lot that people say about President or former President Jacob Zuma. There's a lot that people say about the current president, Ramaphosa, but in those two individuals, I would still see some sort of maturity, for lack of a better word, for former President Zuma, intellect. I don't see that in Julius. This is the first time I've actually called him Julius, but if anybody follows me, they know that I don't refer to him as Julius. But because this is public, I'm going to just say I'll call him Julius for, just to give him some respect. I just don't understand what the EFF actually stands for. And their following. We've all seen what sheep does. This is exactly what EFF's followers are. They are literally sheep. If one person says cancel culture and not knowing why, then you've got 20 others following in the same, following the same sort of thought process. People, they just don't engage. I'm sorry, I can't even say that they have 30% intellect anymore. The intellect they display is actually, or the IQ that they display is probably, that of my shoe size. So, quite frankly, when they stand outside court and say kill the Boer, I find that is hate speech, because if any one of us stood outside a courtroom and said kill a black or kill the K word, we would probably have the death penalty reinstated. We need to move forward as a country and stop putting everything on race, on color. Okay, we are humans, we are South Africans. We are not the EFF, we are not the ANC, we are not the Democratic Alliance, we are not Action SA. We are individuals. Okay, we represent ourselves, we do not represent a party. So if we want to be united in this country, we need to stop worshipping clowns like Julius Malema. Stop worshiping them. Because quite frankly, Julius Malema is sitting in his mansion with his cocktail and his Breitling and his white bodyguards, and you're standing out there chanting for him, but he's giving you nothing. I mean, really, tell me what Julius Malema has actually given his followers. And please don't tell me he built a home, because he did build a home in Nkandla and it fell down. So then, to avoid the negative publicity, he went back and rebuilt that roof. So tell me what he's actually given his followers. I'd really love to know. Besides the violence and besides the chanting of kill the Boer, they can't even say Boer properly, it's boo her. So probably they want to kill boo her, whoever that is. Then go ahead and do it. That's my piece.
Wow. I love it. I love it. Okay. Dodgy, your thoughts quickly, and then I'll get into some of the details.
All right. So firstly, it's I get this lack of feeling whenever someone else expresses their devotion to individualism, especially when it's as fervent as sunflower. So yeah, you're already a favorite. Now you've just notched up a bit more there. So yeah. Now I agree with what she says on us being individualists. I mean, we only represent ourselves. It's just coincidental that we come together as a society for, for our own individual sake, right? But this is a tactic that's being used by what we can call, for lack of a better word, radical collectivists. Um, this sort of disruption, this sort of need to be the center of attention in order to gain some form of relevance. But here's something interesting as well that I've noticed. Julius is growing, or rather, the EFF's following in the previous election from both 2019 and also last year, 2020, didn't grow very much, right? It remained about just over the 2 million. The other parties lost a lot of, let's say, voters, but that's because of low voter turnout and also disenfranchisement and so on and so forth. I think it's also because of what the DA had done, and also other smaller parties and independents also coming into play. But yeah, it seems like Julius's plan is not for the EFF to actually win presidency in South Africa. I think we're making a mistake if we think that. I think his plan for the EFF is self-enrichment. Let's be honest. I mean, if we look at their stores and the message that they give, it's two different things, right? If you're going to be the persons that communicate the plight of the poor, you're not going to sell a T-shirt for like 450 rand. And let's be honest, you're going to try and go as cheap as possible, and you're going to have sort of outreach programs to those citizens. But that's not what we're seeing from the EFF. So it's purely self-enrichment. At least that's my opinion on this whole matter. Coming to the kill the Boer chant, you all know my position on hate speech. I say it does not exist, because any limitation on the right to the freedom of speech is basically an effective gag order against the individual. If we are not allowed to offend anyone, then well, we're entering into a world of trouble. We're already seeing that. As far as the constitutional matter of this goes, I'd like to see the outcome of it, because it can go both ways, because we've already seen how the South African Human Rights Commission handled this sort of in the past, where they said that, it has to be taken into consideration the past of South Africa, the person uttering the supposed hate speech, and if they're black, then it might not be hate speech, but if they're white, it might also be 80% hate speech or some sort of something like that, not percentage-wise, but you get the gist of it. So yeah, that's my view of the matter, at least.
Yeah, no, I gotta admit, man, I don't agree with everything you just said. So I'm gonna push back a little bit. Hate speech does not exist. I don't. Look, I think yes, maybe you can have a bit of a defense by saying, hate speech is a term coined by humans and invented by humans and blah, blah, blah. And maybe that some people were offended by something that somebody said. But I think to some extent, hate speech does exist when it comes to really belittling a group of people, when it comes to, like Julius does with his Kill the Boer. And, some would argue that when that song is chanted, that farmers get killed not too long afterwards. There was rumors, and again rumors, that when I forget who Julius's sidekick is, what's his name again? No, the other one, the small one, that one. Yeah, when he was at Cynical and he was singing a song about burning fields and stuff, that later on they were burning fields. And that to me would constitute as hate speech when you incite violence or create a narrative to incite violence. I don't know. Dodgy, would you agree with that? Or do you still believe hate speech doesn't exist?
No, because here's the next thing that leads into, right? It's called the incitement of violence, which I also don't really understand. How can you be held responsible through words for the actions of individuals who we assume have sovereignty or sovereign agency in their actions, right? Our whole justice system is predicated on this idea that we should hold an individual accountable for his or her own actions, not the actions of someone else, unless perhaps that is a minor. But minors do not have in our society full agency to exercise their will or their freedoms. So I think that is where we differ on this. But does it have an effect? I think so. I think so that it does. I think it can encourage it. I don't think we should say that there is no consequence of it. But I think we should also be very careful about where we draw the lines with regards to the limitations of our freedoms.
Yes, I understand that you're quite a liberal. The freedoms, I understand that, and it's something I also argue sometimes. Like people who want absolute freedom, I'm like, there's no such thing. There's no such thing as absolute freedom. Just like the communists will never get their utopia that they always want. But I'm keen to know, Xavier, Koketsa, and Sunflower, where do you stand on hate speech? I know we've kind of made a bit of a shift here, but I do wanna know from your guys' side, like, do you think hate speech exists? Sunflower, you can go first.
I just want to find out if I stand outside a courtroom and if I say or chant with a group of Indian people, kill black people, would that be constituted as hate speech? Because I think the South African Human Rights Commission would be down my throat, and I'd probably have my house burnt, my car burnt, I work for myself, but then they probably burn me. I think that would be hate speech.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Okay, so I'll let Koketsu and Xavier go first. Then Dodgy, you can rebuttal to anything that anyone says. So Koketsu, you can go ahead. What are your thoughts on this one? I think Koketsu is probably frozen. So I was wondering why he was so still for a moment. All right, he'll be back with us in a moment. We'll get his thoughts. Xavier, you go ahead.
Okay, so Dodgy, we often have chats. Well, not as often as we should, but I get the point you're coming from, and that is the concept of free speech should be entirely free speech, as in there are no limits to what you can say. But it is, as I think Joe has put it quite well, it's a utopian dream. As much as I love free speech, there are some limitations, not because of what you are saying actually. The intellectual value of what you're saying could have, its basis in logic or whatever your belief is. But you got to know that whatever you say is going to affect someone else. And you made a good point about our law actually recognizes that a person has autonomy over their actions and cannot easily be influenced. But that kind of falls away from the reality of the mark. Where I'll come back to what Sunflower said, where she said people are sheeps. And we're seeing that. I mean, COVID has shown us how many policemen are in our families. I mean, there's people in your own family that will tell you, where is your mask? And everyone's like, what the hell? So, the idea that you have autonomy over yourself is great ideologically. But reality, I mean, you read a magazine, you get influenced by Balenciaga, for example. I think that's a bad example. Let's say Mercedes-Benz. So you get influenced by Mercedes-Benz and suddenly you don't like your Toyota Corolla. And there's nothing wrong with your Corolla. You, the person that bought it, you were happy with that car before you saw an advert. So we are beings of influence. And I think freedom of speech it's something to be cautious about. There is freedom of speech in a perfect society where people are not trying to hurt each other. But it comes back to what Sunflower said. If you go outside the court and you turn this narrative around and you say, kill black people, that immediately is not going to cause outcry in South Africa. That's going to hurt everyone unless there's places you find that don't have a big black community. So for example, I think before COVID, I was under the impression that Japan doesn't have a big black community because you never see them. But it's actually a fallacy. China is the one that doesn't actually have a big black community. And when I say big black community, I mean 1.3 billion people in China are Asian descent. The black community doesn't even count for 0.1% of that. So there is a very big black community if you think about it in numbers, but not in percentage of the population. But even there, they would feel it. And we saw that with I think it was, what's this guy, the drug guy that got killed in America? Then I can never remember his name. But Floyd, those protests caused stirs across the world in countries such as Denmark, which do not have a big black population, were screaming BLM. And these were white people. So I think freedom of speech is perfect in a perfect society where people are not hurting each other. But in a realistic society, freedom of speech does need certain limits to ensure that we're not hurting each other. And it sounds silly, but if you take 2-year-olds in a primary school or preschool, they hurt each other on purpose. And it's human nature to hurt someone else and actually find joy in it. It's kind of how we grow. It's kind of how we assert our authority. So, I think the idea of freedom of speech and no hate speech, great ideologically, realistically, it fails.
Yeah. Well put, Xavier. Kakitsu, I'm going to get to you in just a moment. There's something I want to add to what Xavier said as well. I think and this is something pointed out to me by John last night, South Africa is quite a liberal. I know it's teetering towards communism a bit, but in terms of what we're allowed to say already, we can say a lot. If you go to other parts of Africa, there's a lot you can't say about the government. Like, you'll get locked up if you say anything negative about certain governments in Africa, let alone China and other places. So just wanted to point that out. Like, there is a freedom of speech. And it does come with limitations, I think, because if you're given a freedom, there has to be responsibility. That's just my opinion on that. Kaketsu, your thoughts on, do you think hate speech exists or not?
Yeah, I suppose this is where I'm not a libertarian, really. Yeah, I mean, see, the joys of going last is everything you want to say, someone else has already said it.
Sorry.
But yeah, look, I mean, yeah, I'm a free speech advocate, but at the same time, I'll also make the case that it's be offended, as I've seen or heard me say, offend someone is the same right you have to be offended, but there is a line regardless. You don't get to offend someone to the point where you are actually now threatening their very existence. And that blurred line, it never used to be blurred, but it is blurred nowadays. So, yes, you can offend someone. Yes, you do have free speech, but we need to be very careful in how we offend people. That are we not perhaps swimming in deadly waters where we actually calling for some form of genocide, however big or small? So yeah, hate speech is a thing. It should be a thing even inside of the law. There should be laws in place to protect people from being effectively being threatened, having their very existence threatened through something like speech, because that's well past the line of offending someone. But at the same time, we can't now start defining everything as hate speech. In this case, what's happening with Afriforum versus the EFF, at the very least, yes, it is. Kill the Boer is a hate speech term for the same reasons that the rest of the panel has actually outlined, in that if you swap the words, and that's a very basic test. If you just swap out kill the Boer and you swap out Boer for black people or Indian people, or, even right down to Tswana people, or kill the Xhosas, for example, that is well within hate speech. And of course, the South African Human Rights Commission wouldn't even waste time. They'd have a 9 a.m. meeting about it the following day. But how come when we just say Boer in this instance, they don't have the same level of meeting? They don't take it that seriously. They even go further and outright say that no, they do not think it is hate speech. So in our political bloodlust, to go after political opponents, there does need to be care given to make sure that you don't actually go ahead and threaten other people's existence. And unfortunately, that's exactly what the EFF has done. I wish they would have been taken to book by the SAHRC without having to go through the court system. But, if it comes down to the court system, then so be it. They are going to lose this case. And I really do hope that Afriforum, actually wins with that cost order as well. I believe Afriforum versus EFF is already at like 3-0 or something. So yeah, let this be a 4-0, and let it be set a precedent for any and all others after the fact who needs to know that you can't just go around threatening people's existence. It's not okay.
Absolutely. Dodgy, before I let you rebuttal quickly, we're going to let Dodgy say his thing, then we'll move on to the next topic. I want to get into the next topic as soon as possible, because the last topic is going to be quite a intense one. So yeah, Dodgy, anything to say? Anything to add?
All right, so I'll maybe sound like a conceding point here. But freedom does not mean freedom from responsibility or consequences. And from what I can see, as morality is taught, not just given, right? So I'll say this, maybe our position on hate speech is informed on our moral position or posture on harm to individuals and groups of people. Is that fine if I say it like that? Is it fine if I say it like that?
I'm not trying to get you to change your mind, man.
No, but look, it's important that we have these sort of discussions, because from what I understand all of your points, and you make very valid points, and this does give me pause to think about my position. And I mean, that's the whole point of discussion, isn't it? So yeah, it's important that we make these discussions, but that has shown me perhaps a lack in my thinking in this position. Sorry, Xavier, I cut you off there.
So, Dodgy, you've kind of worded it quite well now. I like how you've defended your position. Let's go back to World War II, which was the greatest atrocity. I don't care what anyone says. World War II was genuinely the greatest atrocity the world has ever seen. And
COVID might take over, though. Just saying.
No, never, never. I mean, they dropped 2 bombs on Japan and wiped out like millions of people in seconds. You don't beat that. So, when you go back to World War II, you look at how the war progressed. And then you look at the first Americans who actually came onto French beaches. And there were a lot of Jewish descendants of, the Jews kind of originated in Europe and the Middle East, and then they moved across to the United States slowly. It wasn't very big before World War II. And when they got to the beaches, these were young men. And they, war teaches you to hate your enemy to the point where they are no longer human. They no longer represent a human being. They do not deserve the same rights as a human being. And you can kind of call them what you want. And in a bid to dehumanize the Nazis, they didn't call them Nazis. The general term was Krauts, as in sauerkraut, which is a very popular cabbage pickle in Germany. And it doesn't smell good, but it tastes good. Anyway, so you would fight the Krauts. That was in the trenches. Then you fast forward to the apartheid era. You've got a minority population of a country oppressing, and it was an oppressment of the majority population for many years. But this goes back to the starting of South Africa. The majority population was always oppressed by the English kingdom, the United Kingdom. And again, when we gained our independence, the country might have gained its independence, but the majority population did not gain its independence. And you've got all this bad faith, that is now represented purely by the color of your skin, where a white man is boss and a black man is not boss. And in 1994, we did a whitewash, which was the TRC. And this helped mostly the politicians and a few notable victims so that it looked good on TV. But the general population never reached the same point. We didn't have truth and reconciliation as an entire country. And now you're coming back to the point where, does a person born after 1994 have the right to say, I hate white people? And historically, if you take cognizance of the historical facts of South Africa, if that person is taught those facts, it is likely that they might generate that hate. If you take anyone, I grew up in the 90s. So we went to school, we used to watch, what's that famous movie with Somizi in there? I forget. Koketso, do you know it? They used to play it on ETV.
Sarafina.
Serafina, that's the one. Yes. So, if you watch Serafina, no matter what color you are, and Joe, maybe you should do it if you haven't watched Serafina. Watch Serafina and see what you feel at the end of that movie. Do you feel happy, or do you feel quite angry at what has happened in the country? And this, Serafina is about events from 1976. It's not even relevant today. But it is. Once you watch that movie, it becomes relevant. So, hate speech does gain a bit of, let's say, authority when there is a massive abuse of human rights by one group. And I think that's why Kill the Boer is acceptable for some South Africans. Whereas for us, logically sane people who can, kind of independently think about things, we don't get to that point where we say Kill the Boer is acceptable. We're not going to get to that point. But for the person who is not so clued up on what has historically happened, they might not get to that point to say Kill the Boer is actually a bad thing. Farm murders are actually a bad thing. They're going to be like, yeah, do that. So I think that's my 2 cents on defending Dodgy on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that you said, buddy. I think that's a nice way to also end. I think you mentioned you put it in great context, and you referenced history, which I love. And that's the thing. I was actually telling John this last night as well. It feels like we've forgotten a bit of our history. We've forgotten what some of the really evil people did, and World War II is a great example. And yet it just feels, in some ways, history is repeating itself. But we'll leave it at that. I think in closing of this topic, EFF doing what they do best. They EFF. They try and cause, destruction wherever they are. I think it was Xavier who said they're a terrorist organization, or they're like a terrorist organization, and I agree with that as well. Hopefully, as Koketso pointed out, it will be 4-0 for Afriforum in the days to come. I believe Ernest did tweet out that it's a 7-day or something like that. It's over 7 days that they're going to have this trial. So hopefully no more, or hopefully the violence doesn't escalate. But we'll see what happens. We'll keep an eye on the story as well. Moving on, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to show the